Okay, this is going to be a little demo of how to edit the UVs in Maya, in Autodesk Maya, and then how to begin texturing objects in Adobe Substance Painter. Substance Painter is a great platform. It's the industry standard texturing software, and if you're looking to get into 3D modeling and texturing in general, it's a platform that I highly recommend you use. So right here, I've got a very basic kind of object that I just quickly modeled. I'm going to quickly just combine it and remove the history so that it's one object. But basically what we're going to do is take this object and edit the UVs so that they can be prepared. If you don't know what a UV map is, basically a UV map is portraying basically a UV map is a 2D image of a 3D model in a sense. So basically it's like you're taking a 3D model or a 3D object and you're spreading out the faces onto a 2D image. And basically what's that doing is that when you bring it into Substance Painter, that UV map is going to basically communicate with the program and tell it where to place the different colors and materials onto the object. Right? It's a map. It's the mapping of it. Okay? So to do that, we're going to open the UV editor. And to do that, you can either go over here to Workspace and do UV editing, which is very handy. That's actually what we'll do. We'll do that. So you can see here, we are in the Workspace UV editing. And I select my model just by clicking it. You can see here, this little box, this 1x1 box, is our UV map. You can see right here, we are currently seeing this in the UV editor, and there's also something called the UV toolkit here. The UV toolkit is what we're going to mainly be using to kind of edit the UVs and kind of spread them out and control how they look on this map. You can also right-click, hold down right-click, and go to UV shell. This will allow you to click the various objects. Since these objects were separated at first, they have different shells. So this is the cube. You can see the shell of the cube underneath, the sphere, and the cylinder. See how that works. But for now, I'm just going to go back into object mode and have it like this. The quickest and easiest way to do UVs, and a quite simple and effective way, is to just go underneath to this create menu and click automatic. Maya will automatically spread out the UVs onto a map for you, and it will also kind of control where it goes, bunch it up in ways that make sense. When you go to edit it and put textures on it, it will kind of look right. So it's quick and easy, but it also can be messy depending on what you want to do. You can see here now that my shells are kind of split up, right? It's not the full object anymore. You can see here on the sphere, it's like that. Same thing with the cube. They kind of split up the faces. Right. Basically doing that, that's what they did. Basically cut the UVs, right? Cut it out by the faces, or by sections of faces, by basically using this cut tool. And what this cut tool is going to do is that all these edges, these various edges, are kind of going to be manipulated in various ways in Substance Painter. So if I wanted to have an edge here for my objects, then this works fine, right? Using this. But you can also control kind of what is cut by, so if I selected this edge specifically and I clicked cut, then it would cut out that edge, right? Basically what that's doing is that in Substance Painter, there are materials that you can add to your object that you're texturing, and they basically will apply materials only to the edges of an object, right? They're called edge modifiers. So if I'm applying an edge modifier onto my object, the edges on the UV map are important because that is what it's kind of telling to modify, right? So that's where that cut tool can be useful. And if you have stuff that you don't want to be cut, you can simply sew it back together, right? So if you want to experiment more with that, I recommend checking out kind of more stuff about the cut and sew tool. In this unfold menu, if I go back to object mode, there's also these two buttons, which I used to use before finding automatic, because it's kind of useful. But optimize and unfold. Now if I click optimize, what this is going to do is optimize UVs if there's any kind of bad topology. It's going to try to fix that in a way that kind of makes sense. And then unfold will also just kind of unfold it for you there, right? Arrange and layout, you can orientate the shells and layout it as well. So usually what I would do is click automatic to get a nice simple thing, and then if you really want, you can also click layout. But this automatic button also lays it out for you just fine, so that works. So very, very simple. The way you want your UVs to look is going to depend on the object, but for right now, this is completely fine with me. There's these other buttons, cylinder, normal base, planar. That can be useful in certain situations. I'll just kind of click through them. Cylinder kind of lays that out like a cylinder. You can see here. Spherical does a sphere. You can see how it looks like right here. Planar is flat. You can see like that. Normal based is based off the normals. Camera based is cool because you can see my camera is pointed like this, so the UVs are made like that. I don't really know when this would be useful, but it does look very, very cool. But I'm just gonna do automatic. Now that that's done, I'm gonna have my object selected, go to File, Export Selection, make sure I am on FBX Export. If you don't see it, you might have to scroll down a little bit. Title it joystick, and click enter and export. Now I'm going to go to Substance Painter, and let me grab, there that was. So I'm simply just going to drag and drop it into Substance Painter. You can also go over here and click File and New and do the same thing. It's gonna put your file in there, so that's my mesh file. It'll ask you for a template. You can kind of scroll through here, depending on if you want to go with Unity, Unreal, even at Roblox, or just standard PBR stuff, Blender too. There's a bunch of templates that you can use. I'm just going to keep it at Unity, the HDRP pipeline. Document resolution. This will determine the resolution of your textures. I'm just going to keep it at 512 to keep it kind of simple. Normal map format I have as OpenGL. I have compute, tangent space per fragment, off, use tile. Uses UV tile overlay off, import cameras on, auto unwrap on, and then you can also import your own baked maps if you decide to bake out of Substance Painter. But that is something that we are going to get on right now. So let me just click OK. It's going to load up your object. You can kind of see here. Basically similar to the scene we have in Maya, where it's kind of showing your UV map. We have the same thing in Substance Painter. So this is our UV map with the textures applied to it. And here you can move around the scene with the same controls as Maya. And you can see your object and when it's actually modeled. A few things that are important. Right now I have the texture set settings open. This will basically tell me the specific material settings that I have on right now. So right now I have these channels selected: base color, height, roughness, metallic, and normal. Right. Base color is your albedo. Height will determine kind of how the shading of a texture looks. Roughness is how kind of reflective that object is going to be, and metallic will give it that kind of metallic look, and it also kind of gives it some shine as well. So depending on how you want light to reflect off the object, those two settings are going to be important. But before we begin any texturing, we're going to scroll down here into the mesh maps thing, and we're going to bake mesh maps. This is going to open the baking menu. You can select, so right here you have the various maps that you are going to bake, And what baking is basically taking a high poly version of this model, taking the attributes from that high poly version, and transferring them to a low poly version, right? That's all it's doing. But it's also telling the texture, it's also just baking the UVs into the texturing platform, okay? So right now I have normal map selected, world space ID, world space ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, thickness, height. These maps you select are going to depend on what materials you're using. Curvature is something that's going to affect the height of some materials. So really it's just kind of what you want to do here. Then you have an output size again here. I'm just going to have these selected and click bake. It's going to take a little bit. You can kind of see it kind of go through its animation here. And then once it's done, you'll see the textures or the maps load in here. And you can just click return to painting mode. And you'll see them once again here. And then that's how you know that you have baked your maps. Now onto here, you can see that I have the layers and texture set list. The texture set list is just going to show the various materials that you have on the object. So right now I only have one material on the object, but if I had multiple on it, say like I wanted a red material on this top button and kind of two different ones here for each of the other objects, then I would have 3 materials listed out for one object. But right now I just have one. But basically if I did have those materials, I'd be able to click through and switch between them. Right? And then depending on what material you have selected, you have the layers tab here for that material. So this is where it kind of acts similar to Photoshop. So you can see here that this is a layer. Right now I'm currently on a paint layer, and you can kind of see reflected when I'm hovering my mouse over the object that I have this kind of circle. So if I were to hold down and kind of start painting, you can kind of see that paint layer reflected on the model. This is cool for certain situations if you want to paint specific features on your model. Paint layers are very useful for that. You can see down here in the properties, you can control kind of the parameters of what you want to do. Right? To give a quick demo of what some of these things might do, let's first check out height. Height is something that is important, but is really simple and can create some cool effects, and is really simple to kind of understand. You just need to see it first. So right now, you can see my height is at 1. If I paint, you'll see that the shadows are manipulated in a way to make it look like the object is kind of 3D in a way. Like this paint is kind of 3D. It's kind of like extruding upwards, right? Well, that's really, it's flat when you actually look at it, right? So that's really just the shadows of that kind of in play there. That is what a height of 1 does. It makes it look like it's popping out. If I did a height of -1, you guessed it, it looks like it's caving in. So that is really useful when you're trying to do specific modifiers or edit some specific stuff. Height is something that is really simple, but can add a really cool effect. So that is something that you guys should look out for. If you don't want to use any of these things, say like I don't care about the roughness, like, or the metallic of the object, you can simply just click these nodes and it will turn them off. So if I only want the color, then I only get the color. Besides paint layers, there is a base color node, a fill layer. You can add various generators, fills, levels, a bunch of filters, all stuff that I highly recommend checking out. But for now, this is just normal fill layer. Let's say I wanted to make it red. Now my entire object is red. Very, very simple. Kind of still see that it has some shine. So like if I really wanted that to be completely flat, then I would enable roughness and just drag that to 1. And you can see the shine. See that? That's what roughness works with. So I just want that to be at 1. But now I also want a fill layer of kind of like a black color. I want this base to be black and the top to be red. But you can see now that they're kind of overlapping with each other. And then see, this is still one material. So there's two ways to kind of fix this issue. If I want two parts of the same object to be different colors or have different effects on them, right? One way is to create separate materials for each part. So in Maya, I would create a separate material specifically with the faces of the cube, and then another one for the sphere. But if you're going to import this into a game, having that many different materials not only leads to storage issues, but it also is just kind of a pain to be setting up, because when you go to export the textures, you're going to have like sometimes double or triple the amount of textures that you'll need to hook up. So instead, we're going to use one material, and over here I'm going to drag my red fill layer up, because that's what I want the red sphere to be. Like, I only want this red sphere to be affected by the red, and everything else can just be this base color. What I'm simply going to do is go to this button, add a mask, and add a black mask. Now you can see that the red disappeared. Basically what this black mask is doing is whatever's affected by the black mask is going to be kind of invisible. So right now the entire object is getting covered by that black mask. Now with this black mask selected, I'm going to go over here on the left to polygon fill. You'll see this will kind of bring up this display and also this menu over here. For fill mode, this is triangle fill, polygon fill, mesh fill, and UV chunk fill. If I did polygon fill, then I could select specific faces on the sphere and turn them red. So this can be useful. You can also drag select, but this can be useful if like I was editing something specifically and I wanted, oh, like I just want this specific row to be like red. Another fill option is the mesh fill. If you remember, in Maya, these three objects were originally, or this object was originally three different meshes: the sphere, the cylinder, and the cube. So this mesh fill basically allows me to select that entire sphere of its original object and turn it red, which is just what we want. Then you also have UV chunk fill, which you can see here. I can select the specific chunks of UVs that we had laid out and do it like that. So the same, does the same job, but just slightly different methods. Mesh fill is the easiest since we have it separated by mesh, but if you had it separated by UV chunks, you can also do that. And then to go back to your normal mode, just click back onto one of the fills. So now I can see we have exactly what I wanted, right? That red kind of top sphere, and then the black base. So black masks are really useful. You can see here, there's like a color slider. So if I were to slide this to 0 and select it, it would go back to black. 1 goes back to red. So that is what that's doing. So you can kind of select there as well, specific things to edit. Okay, so that's very, very simple. And that's kind of how you edit the various materials, how you can kind of separate the different objects in a model, in one singular model, so that you can get everything into one texture map instead of doing a bunch of different materials. That is that. Then you might have also noticed here there's an asset library. Of all these windows here too, you might need to go to window and open some of them. There's assets, layers, properties, texture set list, texture settings. This is just the way I have it laid out, so just keep that in mind. You can arrange it however you want. But right now I'm just going to deselect this materials button, And you can see here in all the libraries, no filters on. This is all the materials that Substance Painter kind of has for you to use for free use. If I do go to materials, you can kind of see the list of PBR materials that Substance Painter allows you to use. And it's really simple. All you do is just drag the material and put it onto your object here, or you can also just layer it however you want there. But I'm just going to drag it in, and you can see it'll apply that material onto your object. They also have something called Smart Materials, which is the last thing I'll kind of show. But these are kind of more detailed materials. So if I drag this wood on, you can see this is, instead of one material, it's a folder full of kind of various presets of this specific wood texture. Smart materials are very useful for reusing on various objects. It's something that you can do on your own as well. So if I were to create something like this wood, for example, and I was like, oh, this wood looks really good, I actually want to use it on other objects that I make in the future, you can right click on it and create a smart material. And what that will do is create a smart material of that wood kind of folder, everything that you have set up here, and put it into your library for later use. So it's really useful to create smart materials if you know you're going to reuse kind of the same setup in objects in the future, or if you just want to create kind of one central material and then use that as a base for creating other materials. So you can just apply it to whatever you create and edit it specifically how you want. It makes the process much, much faster. And it's something that you should look into or take advantage of in your kind of creating process. Another thing I want to mention is similar to Photoshop. You can see here I got normal just kind of activated right now, but if you clicked on the drop down, it has a bunch of various layer options of how you want to display stuff, as well as an opacity slider there. I can't cover everything that Substance Painter does, but it is a really, really useful and fun program in my opinion to use. Texturing is one of my favorite parts in the modeling process because it's when you actually get to see your kind of gray objects come to life for the first time. So I highly recommend checking it out more. But let's get on to exporting these materials out. So exporting is very, very simple. Similar to Maya, all you're going to go to is File, Export Textures. You can choose and output whatever folder you kind of want to send it to. Again, you can choose kind of what format you want to use, what template, the file type, how many bits it is, the size, padding, whatever, and then all you do is click export and it's done. And then you have those materials in that folder, and that is it. Then whenever you go into Engine, you're going to bring your object and the materials and then and the textures and apply those textures to the materials, and voila, you're done. So hopefully this video was helpful. It was kind of long, but it kind of went over the whole process of doing everything. So I really recommend you checking out Substance Painter even more and getting familiar with UV editing, even if it's just the automatic tool. But just getting familiar with that process of bringing objects out of Maya and actually applying textures to them for game use, as well as making sure that they are optimized, you know, limited a number of materials, making sure the UVs are actually good. I recommend doing research on how to properly set up a UV map, because the automatic tool does its job, but it isn't necessarily the cleanest, most effective way. So really recommend checking out more stuff if you are into that. But besides that, let me know in the comments or just message me if you have any questions about anything, or if you're interested in learning anything specifically. Maybe we can do a workshop on that later. But this was the intro to Substance Painter, and I hope you guys enjoyed, learned, and continue to learn in the future. So, see ya!